Recognize the honourable member Halifax-Chebucto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with the imminent passage of this bill into law, a number of very difficult things are about to become deeply entrenched in the life of the people of Nova Scotia. One, with this bill, the government is deeply entrenching the fixed-term lease system into residential tenancies in our province. That is, with this bill, fixed-term leases ought not any longer to be thought of as singularities or one-off abuses or anything of this sort. They have become the very system of landlord-tenant relations in our province. Landlords have been very candid in their appearances at standing committees of this House, most recently this week at the Law Amendments Committee, about how we got to this place and how this came about. First, they have explained fixed-term leases became used more broadly. More broadly, I mean, than their obvious limited on the face of it purpose. They became used more broadly in response to the security of tenure provisions of the 2010 Residential Tenancies Act. Fixed-term leases allowed landlords to evade security of tenure by, in effect, having tenants take up residence on long-term probationary bases. Then, with the first rent cap in 2020, the practice became even more widespread as a way of generating a yearly supply of new tenants to whom the rent cap would not apply. Madam Speaker, by 2024, so widespread has this practice become of undermining security of tenure and undercutting the rent cap through fixed-term leases that tenants advocates now see very few forms of leases other than fixed-term leases, and 22% of those forced to live outside in our province identify either rent evictions or evictions at the close of fixed-term leases as the reason why they lost their home. With this bill, what was once an occasional aberration has become deeply entrenched as the very system of residential tenancies in Nova Scotia. The result is that to rent your home in our province is now, across the board, to live standing on one foot, with your housing permanently under a question mark, with all the anxiety and all the uncertainty that that entails. That's one. Two, when members of the government vote for this third reading of this bill, they will, we should be very clear, be deeply entrenching the failure of the rent cap to actually cap the rent. Rent cap 3, the rent cap in place at the moment, can only be regarded as a complete failure. It has set rent legislatively at 5%, and rent has increased more than 3 times that, to 18% or a little better. And yet, in the context of this failure, every single one of the defining features of rent cap failure 3, the tying of the cap to tenancies rather than units, the exemption of certain forms of leases from the cap's provision, the lack of a system for deriving the percentage of the cap, every single one of the defining features of rent cap failure 3 is carried over here in this legislation, holus bolus, into this rent cap 4 that is before us. I can't think of any other instance where a public program has failed so completely as the 5% to 18% non-cap rent cap, and then at the conclusion of this failure has been adopted lock, stock, and barrel without reform, without adaptation of any kind as the successor program to itself. So the result can't be anything other than to deeply entrench, secondly, the present rent cap's failure. And 3, with the passage of this act, the government, make no mistake, will be deeply entrenching imbalance in landlord-tenant relations in Nova Scotia. An allowable annual rent increase that provides landlords at 5%, 2.5 times more than the rate of inflation. New rules reducing the time before rental arrears may lead to the initiating of processes for eviction from 15 days to 3. Eviction grounds expanded. Processes expedited. What was a system for incentivizing eviction in Rent Cap 3 is about to become a system for incentivizing and facilitating eviction in Rent Cap 4. This entrenches the imbalance of power between landlords and tenants at a whole new level. With this legislation, Madam Speaker, the landlords' party here has buttered both sides of the landlord's toast. Thank you.